After the epidemic, zombies were not the most dangerous creatures on Earth. Hello everyone, this is Jacobson and this is a short retelling of the first and second episodes of the 5th season of the zombie series The Walking Dead. You can see the previous episodes at the links in the video description. Thank you so much for participating and for the 1,400 subscribers. Hopefully we'll keep it up and by the next video we'll have 1,500 subscribers. Once this video gets 200 likes, I will release the next installment. Enjoy watching it.
Daryl informs Maggie that she was taken away in a black car with a white cross on the back seat, and that she is alive. Meanwhile, Rick and the rest of their group are trapped in a train carriage. They quietly make weapons using scraps of clothing and the inside of the car. Their kidnappers release tear gas into the carriage, catching them by surprise. Rick, Daryl, and Glenn Beans are brought to the slaughterhouse, where Terminus residents begin to strike and slit the throats of other captives in an alarmingly neat and precise manner, allowing blood from the cut throat to ooze into the gutter, presumably to drain the blood from them before preparing them for food. The first to be killed is Sam, a young man whom Rick and Carol met during a hike before Carol's exile. Before Glenn is killed, Harry interrupts to question Rick about the bag he hid in the woods. At first Rick refuses, but after Gareth threatens to stab Bob in the eye, Rick admits that there are weapons in it, including rifles, pistols, a bow and a machete. And the last thing he says to Garrett, "That's what I'm going to kill you with." The butchers behind Glenn prepare to kill him again, but before Glenn gets hit with a baseball bat, shots are heard outside, followed by a powerful explosion. Earlier in the day, Carol and Tyrese head to Terminus carrying Judith. They hear gunshots and watch as a herd of walkers flock to the noise. They arrive at a hut where Martin, a resident of Terminus, sets off fireworks to scare the walkers away from Terminus. Carol and Tyrese hear him mention the members of the group on the radio, and take him at gunpoint. Carol takes the explosives from Martin and sets off towards Terminus, smeared with the guts of walkers to disguise herself. Meanwhile, Tyrese is watching Martin in the hut. Martin tries to convince Tyrese to take his car and leave with Judith. At the perimeter fence, Carol sees Garrett's men dragging Rick, Daryl, Glenn and Bob to the slaughterhouse. She shoots a propane tank inside Terminus, then launches one of Martin's fireworks into the breach, resulting in a massive explosion. Walkers break into the building and start killing its inhabitants. At the slaughterhouse, Rick calmly cuts his handcuffs, made of rope, with a wooden stick that he hid in his sock. He frees himself and, along with Daryl, Glenn and Bob, makes his way out. Mary sees walkers coming through a hole in the fence and runs inside to the memorial room. Carol, disguised as a walker, enters Terminus with the herd. Maggie, Carl, Michonne, Sasha and Abraham's team are anxiously waiting in the train carriage after hearing the commotion outside. Terror reigns, walkers feast on the inhabitants of Terminus. Carol, taking advantage of the confusion, shoots Terminus snipers. When Rick, Daryl, Glenn and Bob leave the slaughterhouse, they see human body parts hanging from meat hooks. Rick tells his group that if they come across other Terminus residents, they should kill them without hesitation. They hear someone shouting and knocking from the warehouse. On the way to rescue the other survivors, Glenn insists on opening another train car to free the prisoners inside. But when they do, an abnormal man runs out of there with wild screams, and then a walker attacks him. Carol discovers a room filled with things stolen from Terminus victims. She finds Rick's watch, which he gave to Sam, and Daryl's crossbow. Rick's group ambushes a group of Terminus residents and takes their weapons. Carol discovers the sanctuary of Terminus. Mary confronts her and they fight. When Carol gets the upper hand, Mary explains that Terminus used to be a real sanctuary until a group of looters raped and killed her people. The lesson, Mary explains, is, either you're a butcher or you're a brute. Carol, unconvinced, shoots her in the leg and leaves her to be torn to pieces by walkers. Returning to the hut, Tyrese is distracted by the approaching walkers. Martin grabs Judith and threatens to kill her if Tyrese doesn't come out. Tyrese obeys, and Martin listens to his screams while the walkers attack. Martin goes to check if Tyrese is alive. Tyrese bursts through the door and knocks Martin down. Outside, the ground is littered with walkers that Tyrese killed with his bare hands. Returning to the train car, Eugene says that before the fall, he helped develop harmful viruses to fight other harmful diseases. He says that his team has developed a system that can kill all people on the planet, and the same system may be able to destroy walkers. Rick's team rescues the rest of the group from the train car. Reunited, they make their way out of Terminus. Rick leads the group to a cache of weapons in the woods. He insists that they return and kill the remaining residents of Terminus, but the others do not agree. The fences are down, Maggie thinks. They will run or die. Carol appears. Daryl runs up to Carol and hugs her tightly. Both of them are irritated by tears of joy, seeing that they are alive and well. "Did you do that?" Rick asks, hugging her too and thanking her for saving him. Carol leads everyone to the cabin, where Tyrese Judith is waiting for them. Rick and Carl run there and happily reunite with the baby, and Sasha hugs his brother. While the group is resting, Tyrese tells Carol that he killed Martin. Rick decides that they will get as far away from Terminus as possible. Abraham intends to tell Rick about their mission, but is not going to yet. The group walks along the railway tracks until they come across a Terminus sign. Rick crosses out most of the text and changes it like this: "There is no shelter." A few months after Rick's escape from Terminus, a masked stranger walks along the railroad tracks. He stops to look at the Terminus sign that Rick has changed and hangs his head. The sign is a little more overgrown than when we saw Rick changing it, which suggests that several months have passed. The stranger takes off his mask. It's Morgan. He begins to follow a series of markings on the trees, a circle with the letter A inside, in an unknown direction. It is unknown who exactly left these signs. The group is on the road again and decides to take a break. While Glenn and Maggie exchange tender words, Tara approaches the scream. "You didn't want to be there. That's why I tried to talk to you," Rick tells Tara, remembering how he called Tara before the bloody fight with the governor. He thanks her for saving Glenn and welcomes her to the group and even accepts her offer to clap his fist. Carol and Tyrese fill bottles with water from the stream and discuss whether the group will accept Carol for the murder of Karen and David in prison. Carol says they don't have to accept it, but Tyrese insists she does. Tyrese says they don't need to talk about Lisa and Mickey, he says he just wants to forget about what happened. The group continues on their way and stumbles upon a lone walker. Michonne says she can handle it, and reflexively pulls out the katana she lost in Terminus. Sighing, she deals with him, hitting him with her weapon and punching his head with the butt. Abraham sees this and says to Razite, "That's why we are waiting in the wings." That night, when the group is camping in the woods, Rick talks to Carol. "I owe you everything," he tells her. Carol answers, "You owe Tyrese, he was in jail." Carol takes Rick's watch out of her bag and gives it to him. He tells Carol that he saw the residents of Terminus kill Sam. He offers her to return the watch, but she refuses. Rick regrets sending her away, to which she responds, "You said I could survive. You were right." He notices the irony of kicking her out and then having to live with her on the road, and turns things around by asking for permission to join her instead of giving her permission to return to the group. "Will you accept us?" he asks. She nods. Later that night in the woods, Carol and Daryl sit together and have the opportunity to talk about the terrible things that have happened lately. But after a long silence, she says she doesn't want it. "I just need to forget it," she says, repeating Tyrese's words. They both hear the noise and get up to look. Daryl says it's okay. In another camera angle, a silhouette moves through the trees in front of Daryl and Carol. The next day, walking through the forest, everyone hears a noise and prepares weapons. Daryl comes out of the woods with several squirrels that he caught. "We give up," he says jokingly. Daryl tells Rick that he didn't see any trace of whoever was following them last night. Abraham begins to persuade Rick to accept his plan, innocently offering to find a way and go north until they find a car. Bob and Sasha are playing a game called The Good Out of the Bad, where Sasha talks about the bad, and Bob has to find a positive moment. For example, the danger around every corner is never boring. They kiss, and Sasha explains the game to Tyrese, who happily watches what is happening. The group hears cries for help, and Carl convinces Rick to help. There they find a man, judging by his clothes, a preacher, sitting on a rock surrounded by walkers. The group deals with the walkers, and then forms a perimeter, looking incredulously at the still frightened man. Rick tells the man that he can come down, and he comes down. He is clean and neatly dressed. Rick asks if he's okay, and the man spits, apologizes, thanks the group, and introduces himself as Father Gabriel. Gabriel says he doesn't have a gun and that the Word of God is the only protection he needs, to which Daryl responds cynically, "Of course, it doesn't sound like." Gabriel says he called for help and God responded with their arrival. He asks for food, and Carl offers a meager handful of nuts. Gabriel sees the baby and says that Judith is a wonderful child. When Rick pressed him, he said he had a church. Rick forces him to raise his hands above his head, searches him for weapons, and asks him 3 questions from prison. "How many walkers have you killed?" "Actually, none." Rick continues, "How many people have you killed?" "Not one." Gabriel answers, "Why?" "Because the Lord turns away from violence." Rick presses it. "What did you do?" "We've all done something. I am a sinner, I sin almost every day. But I confess these sins to God, not to outsiders." As they head to Gabriel's church, Rick asks if Gabriel has been following them. Gabriel says he stays in the country because people are just as dangerous as the dead. "No, people are worse," Rick says. Gabriel says that the rock has been the farthest from his church since its foundation, but then starts cheekily joking that maybe he is lying and leading them into a trap to steal all their squirrels. "Members of my congregation have often told me that my sense of humor leaves much to be desired," says Gabriel, when he sees a not too friendly reaction to his joke. Soon the group stays in the church. Rick cautiously asks permission to enter the church first. Gabriel unlocks the door and the group enters, weapons at the ready. Inside, Carol finds a book on the table that shows that Gabriel or someone else copied the Bible by hand. On one page he wrote in huge letters, "You must not kill." Vic finds empty food cans around the altar. Michonne draws attention to children's drawings. Rick calls the rest of the people. Abraham offers to fix the church bus and take it to Washington. Michonne wants to rest and gather supplies first, and Rick agrees. Abraham looks like he wants to object, but Glenn tells them that one way or another they will follow Rick and not split up. Tara adds as he said, and even Bob joins in. Inside, Gabriel says that he lives off the food collected in the church during the annual canned food collection campaign, as well as in the garbage. He says he cleaned out all the nearby houses, except one, which was filled with about a dozen walkers. Bob and Sasha agree to go with Rick to check on him, and Tyrese agrees to sit with Judith. Rick thanks Tyrese for his help. Rick forces Gabriel to go with them because he doesn't trust him. Before leaving, Rick talks to Carl. Carl says he trusts Gabriel because he thinks everyone can't be bad. Rick tells Carl that Gabriel may have friends and needs him to stay to help Tyrese protect Judith. Rick tells Carl that, no matter what, he is not safe and promises him never to let his guard down. However, before leaving, Carl tells him that they are strong enough, that they can still help people and that they don't need to be afraid or hide. However, Rick still believes that Gabriel is hiding something. On the way to the food bank, Rick, Gabriel, Bob, Sasha and Michonne are going to shovel garbage. Bob tries to persuade Rick to go to Washington. Although Rick is not even sure that he is going to go, Bob is convinced that Eugene will be able to cure the virus and everything will return to normal. "And if you let too much go by itself, nothing will work," says Bob. Rick says it's the real world, and Bob says no, it's a nightmare, and the nightmares end. Carol and Daryl are walking down the road with 4 jugs of water that they have collected. Carol doesn't want to talk about what happened when she was separated from the group. Daryl says they can start over and that Carol saved them, but she just says they're lucky. They come across an abandoned car, and Carol decides to check it out. The car's battery seems low, but Daryl interrupts her when she checks the trunk. "We are not dead. And whatever happened, it happened. Let's start over," Daryl says. Carol says she wants to, and Daryl says she can, although he doesn't look convinced. Carol finds an emergency starter in the trunk. She pushes the button and shows that he has a little charge left, so she says that they should leave the car as a safety net in case things go badly at the church. Maggie and Tara perform a separate task, robbing a gun store. The door is knocked out, and they both agree that the chances that there are remnants left are extremely small. There is a noise from inside, and they take out their weapons. Rick's group is staying at what Gabriel says was a food bank that served the entire neighborhood. They take out their weapons and carefully go inside. There's a huge hole in the floor. It leads to a basement filled with water and smelly, decomposed walkers. "If the sewer could vomit, that's what it would smell like," Bob says. Sasha suggests using several metal shelves in the mud to block the walkers. Rick agrees that this is a good plan. They climb onto the shelves, and Rick forces a frightened Gabriel to go with them. Inside, the water reaches to their waist. Gabriel sees a walker who looks like a church lady with big glasses and panics. He tries to climb the ladder, but it breaks. The others push the shelves and fight their way through the walkers to save Gabriel. Rick catches up with a walking church lady and breaks her rotten head before she can grab Gabriel. Bob comes up for supplies and confidently says, "I know which way it will break." While he is dragging a crate of supplies, the walker pulls him down into the water. Bob climbs back up, fighting with a walker who looks like he's rotted to the ground. Bob impales him on a pipe, and Sasha smashes his head with a storage container. She walks up to Bob and asks if he's okay, and he replies that he's fine, although he's obviously shaken. The group loads huge carts with lots of food and leaves. Gabriel apologizes for the panic. Rick asks if he knew the walking church lady when she was still alive, and Gabriel doesn't answer. "Yes, I get it. You tell your sins only to God," Rick says sarcastically. On the way, Rick asks Michonne if she misses her skating. She says it's not hers anyway, she found it at the beginning of the outbreak. She says she felt so good when she killed with it all day, but it wasn't life for her. Michonne says she misses Andre and Herschel, but she doesn't miss what happened before, and that she doesn't miss her skating. Back at the church, Carl shows Rick the deep scratches on the window, indicating that people tried to get into the church. He also discovered that someone had scrawled the words "You will burn for this" on the outer wall of the church. It doesn't mean that Gabriel is definitely a bad guy, but it means something, says Carl. In the evening, the group arranges a fun holiday. Abraham makes a toast. He says that each of the group has earned the title of survivor and makes a toast to the survivors, and everyone raises a toast in return, but he continues, "Is that all you want to be?" He asks and stands for Washington again. He says that just to survive is just to give up. Carol is thinking about running out the door into the car she found at that moment. Abraham says that Eugene will make the dead die, and the living will find this world again, and this is not a bad idea for a little road trip. Eugene says there is an infrastructure in place to withstand pandemics even on such a FUBAR scale, which means food, fuel, shelter, and an end to the walking plague. Looking at Judith, Abraham asks them to save the world for this baby, or for himself, or for those out there. Rick hears Judith cooing and jokes, "She's in business, and if she's in business, then I'm in business, let's do it," and everyone applauds. Bob asks Sasha to kiss him again, and then gets up and leaves, clearly lost in thought. Tara uses this time to tell Maggie that she was in jail with the governor. She says she didn't know who he was or what he could do. Maggie forgives her and says, "Now you're here with us," and hugs her. The face thanks Gabriel for his hospitality and allows them to drink wine for communion. Gabriel drinks it too. He says it's just wine until it's lit up, and there's no one to take communion anyway. Lick tells Gabriel that he knows that he is hiding something. "These people are my family, and if what you're hiding so far does them any harm, I'll kill you," Rick says. Carol runs to the abandoned car. She starts it up, but the noise of the engine attracts a walker, whom she stabs. Daryl comes out of the woods and asks what she's doing. Carol, slightly confused, replies that she doesn't know. He tries to bring her back to the church, and it seems that she is going to go, but at that moment they hear and then see a car speeding past. Daryl runs to the road she drove down to check, and notices that this black car with a distinctive white cross on the back, similar to the one that Beth took. "They took Beth," Daryl says, hastily switching the car's headlights. They both climb into the car and give chase. Bob is outside smiling a happy smile that disappears when he looks at the church. Then he goes into the forest, leans against a tree and cries. Then a robed figure with a hood hits him from behind. There is a symbol on the tree that looks like a horizontal line with a small vertical line descending from the right edge, possibly related to the footprints that Morgan saw. Bob wakes up and sees blurry faces and fire. These are the remaining residents of Terminus. One of them, Martin, is beaten, but not dead, as Tyrese claimed. "The good news is that you're not dead yet," says Gareth. Bob is tied to a post. Gareth says they didn't want to hurt them before, but that's what they have to do. You and your people have taken our house away from us. In order to survive, we must hunt. In one of the frames, Gabriel looks at a photo of a church lady who was a church organist with him when she was alive. The Terminus people say they hope Bob understands that it's not personal, that even though they put them in this situation, they would do it to anyone. Gareth says that in the end, no matter how much they hate all these vile things, a person should eat. Bob is shown that his left leg is missing, amputated at about the knee. He starts to panic from the shock. Garrett bites off the cooked leg of Bob right in front of his eyes. "If it makes you feel better, you're much tastier than we thought," says Garrett. The Terminants feast on the leg of the bean, which is now being roasted on a spit.